Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
And we're still in the off-season. It seems like this off-season has been going on forever, and maybe it's because last year, we had the strike going on and different stuff, and, everything was kind of like jumbled into everything before the strike and everything after the strike. But this year, it just seems like the off-season is just dragging. But there's been some really good articles by Rob Biertempfel over at The Athletic that I just kind of started talking to him with the help of a friend of the podcast and friend of myself, Graves, Voice from the Graves, just an awesome, Pirates Twitter follow, and just kind of wanted to get your ideas, Rob, on what you were thinking about when you were writing this, and maybe to take it just a little bit a step further off of, the pen format, the writing format, to a little bit of discussion. So, Rob,
sure,
how you doing today, brother?
I am hanging in there. I'm staring at started my preliminary packing for spring training. I'm staring at a stack of clothes on my suitcase here, and it's a little bit of an involved process because there's give and take. And it always seems that at some point in spring training, there's a day that just catches you off guard when it's like 40 degrees, and with that wind at the ballpark formerly known as McKechnie Field, it really, in the press box, it drops the windshield. It feels like it's 30 degrees sometimes. So I always got to pack one heavy sweatshirt. But other than that, I'm doing well. Just keeping busy. Yeah,
that weather down there, because especially at the beginning of spring training, can just go from, like you said, just cold to blistering hot. You don't know what. So yeah, you do have to pack a couple extra things, or you'll be running out to get just a sweatshirt from, I don't know, Anna Maria Island or something, or one of the local of the local eateries down there or something, to get you through the day. But I wanted to start with I told you before we got on here and previous to this that your 9 Fearless predictions article really got to me, and kind of drew me in because there was just a lot of topics just in those, just 9 bullet points pretty much. And I went back and you had done a mailbag, and this is 2 things that stuck out to me. And the first one was when we were talking about the Reynolds extension, and I know that nobody wants to talk about this, this anymore, but you had a little piece in there where you said, I suspected for the past couple years, it was a matter of when, not if, Reynolds would be traded. And it wasn't because of the Pirates were cheap. You talked about, Reynolds' career arc, where he was at. And I wonder if that's kind of where that goes into the Pirates offering the 6 years as opposed to Reynolds wanting the 8 years. And it kind of seems like that's where the difference is at. So is that the career arc that you're kind of talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that plays into it. You just look at where he is. I mean, he's closing in on 30 years old. I got a couple of years left, obviously, before he hits there. But I guess in Ben Cherington's heart of hearts, when does he really think that the window is going to open for this team? I know a lot of people wanted it to be, this year or even next. But I kind of suspected all along, in terms of pulling together all the pieces they need and basically what they're going to have to do is build a rotation almost from scratch. It would have been even worse if Mitch Keller hadn't come on last year. I've kind of felt all along 2025 is that year you're going to target for when things might turn and when you might start to have an opportunity. Now, there's variables to play into it. I remember, back in the late 80s, we all thought 1988 was going to be the year, or even 989, when the Pirates would get back there, because they had Bonilla and Barnes and Dan Slike, and they were making these moves. And it just takes a while for things to come together, for intangibles to line up, and for guys' career arcs in terms of how old they are, how experienced they are, how comfortable they feel in their role, how settled they are in their position, where they are in their evolution as a pitcher or a hitter, or in some cases even a fielder. All those things have to line up. That's why, it's crazy when you think about, being a GM and trying to, get all these kittens to march in a single file line. It's difficult to do. So I've always kind of thought 25 is a more realistic year to kind of circle, as this is when things, when you can expect contention to start to happen, playoff contention. And with that, by then, Reynolds is going to be, he'll zoom past 30. He'll be zoomed past his ARB years into his free agency years. And, for a guy like him, that's going to be his one shot to make some money. And is he going to want to roll the dice a little bit and stick it out with the Pirates and try to make his money here? Or is he going to, say, I could, get to free agency and try to make my money that way? And if things aren't lined up yet with the Pirates, that's probably the time to do it, because, things can happen. So, when I mentioned his career arc, there's a lot of stuff that really goes into that, not just in terms of, his age, but where he is, where the team is, where his teammates are. How does this all line up? And then you've got to throw in things like, the front office and management, the coaching staff, where are they all at? It's difficult to get those things to line up, and it just kind of seems that Reynolds' peak, these should be his peak years. His age, 27, 28 years, should be his peak, and it's not going to be the peak for the Pirates. So does it make sense to try to force the issue? I've kind of felt all along that it probably doesn't, that the Pirates would take what they could get, and more importantly, that Brian would take what he could get.
It's definitely it's a tough situation. And I know a lot of times when people are thinking about like this current version of the rebuild or build, or, whatever, you could call it whatever you want. You can call it a pancake. It's what's happening, and just comparing it to the last version, they had, signed McCutchen, then they're, extended McCutchen. They, extended Polanco, extended Tabata, just all those other different types of things. And I had asked the question, and it got a little bit of blowback on Twitter, but I was just like, is Reynolds the McCutchen, or is Reynolds the Jason Bay? And it had nothing to do with them as players and their talent level or whatever, but it was like more of,
right.
Would he be more of the Bay of the, good to very good player on a bad team? Or would he be the guy that would be there when, the team was actually starting to turn it around?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good observation. It's, and you got to think too, in line with, just going back to the career arc thing, how do the Pirates line up with the other teams in their division while all this is going on? And is the NL Central still going to be down in a year or two? It certainly seems like the Cubs are going to start spending some money. The Cardinals, it seems like they're just zombies. You can never kill them. They just keep getting up off the floor and coming after you. The Brewers and the Reds, who sometimes I don't know what the hell the Reds are doing, but there's just so many variables there that, it's no sin to be a really good player on a team that just, it's not there yet, and the circumstances just aren't right. Pirates history, baseball history is littered with those kinds of guys. The guys who just, damn, they were good, but they would have been, gotten so much more attention if only the team hadn't sucked. Well, that's that's kind of the way it goes.
If you ever see me out and about in Pittsburgh, you will always recognize me, and not just because of the white beard, but also because the Y that is always on top of my head, the hat I always wear. The Yins brand, proud partners with Bucs in the Basement. 3 dynasties, 1 brand, Yins. Finally, 1 brand to rep all black and gold. Follow at Shop Yins for new merch drops and giveaways. Order online at www.shopyins, the emphasis on the 2 Z's, high quality comfort, lightweight materials, a new modern look for the black and gold, made for Yins by a Yinzer. Going on to those, the 9 fearless predictions that you had wrote, and kind of talking about we'll stick with like the career arcs, but this would almost be like the coaching career arc of Derek Shelton, and the one thing that you predicted was an extension for Derek Shelton, and this is kind of almost like a 2-part question: would there be like that extension just to give Shelton a chance with a team that's more put together, and then also like what would this mean for an Andy Haynes and an Oscar Marine, as far as Derek Shelton is, as of right now, as far as we know, is a lame duck manager.
Right. I think it would be, when they hired him, no one could have predicted that we were going to just, stare down a global pandemic right after that. Everybody knew the team was not in great shape, but no one knew the world was going to be shaken. And it's been, it's been difficult. It's been difficult for Shelton. His first couple of years, especially these last couple of years. Last year in particular, I was a little surprised that they lost 100 games. But again, he can only do so much with the roster that's given him, and it seemed pretty clear that management was still in that, I guess, kind of a shakedown mode. Seeing what guys, have any kind of future with the club, whether it's in a reserve role or starting role. They rolled through a lot of bad players last year, and some of that was probably to keep the service clocks from stopping, from not starting yet with guys like Cruz and whatnot. And some of it was just to figure out what they had. Was Hoy Park going to be worth anything? They traded for him. Is he going to be worth anything? Michael Chavis, can they get anything out of him? And by the end of the season, they had their answers on a lot of different fronts. This year, it's a different kind of shakedown. I think it's something that Shelton mentioned when we talked to him on Friday, is it the groups of players, of candidates, I guess you could say, at the different positions. They're smaller, more talented, but they're fewer in number. There's fewer guys that they're looking at and evaluating for roles right now because they have a better idea of where they're at. I think that's going to help. I mean, you're not going to necessarily roll, Josh Van Meter out there at 9 different spots on the field, every day for 3 months and wonder why the hell things aren't going well. There'll be a different change, different kind of approach. The players that they put out there will be more suited to their roles. There'll be less, let's see what happens, and more, let's see where we can take this, if that makes sense. I think just in that regard, that's going to help Shelty. That's probably a big consideration why management would say, let's give him some more time and see what he can do.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to jump back and forth on articles, but it kind of, the one that you put out today about the opening day roster with Shelton, you wrote he averaged 153 lineups per 162 games over his first 3 seasons. According to the analyst Bill James, 69% were the lefty righty platoon edge. And that I think it's, what was it in Bill James' handbook? It's that you could get maybe about 17 extra runs by moving around these lineups as much. So that's where it's just like, is Shelton gonna continue? Because we're hearing a lot about, the platoons and stuff with, Sawinski's numbers and bringing in Connor Joe and just, McCutcheon at DH and then Santana and Choi at first, all these different like platoon things. Is he still going to have those lineups? And I always think that there's something to a player knowing where they're going to hit day to day.
Yeah. Well, I think short answer to your question is, we're still going to see those platoons this year. In some cases, a lot of cases, they're going to be necessary. I go back to my days as a college football writer. I covered teams that had quarterback platoons, and what you heard then was true then, and it's still true now. If you have two quarterbacks, that really means you have zero quarterbacks. A lot of times a team like the Pirates, the roster is short on bona fide talent, on standout talent. You're going to you're going to make do trying and mixing and matching and putting guys in different situations and doing this and doing that. And you're trying to scrimp by. So, the Pirates would probably counter by like, hey, those 17 runs, those are important. We might win, half of those games. And that could be the difference between, 70 losses, which looks, okay, and 62 wins that looks miserable because it's 100 losses. So I get the point. And I think still we're going to see a lot of that this year because you're still, I'm still not sure that some of the guys they have are quite everyday regulars. And a lot of players will tell you exactly what you said. There's a lot to be said for them. They want to come in and they don't want to have to look at the lineup card again. They want to know that I'm here today and I'm going to be batting third and playing left field, but that's not how it is with the Pirates. And maybe that's one of the reasons sometimes guys go to different teams and flourish more because the talent level around them is different and the expectations and just the system is different.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely does. I mean, it just makes it, because I know there's been like all those conversations about how, Shelton and Donnie Kelly sit down and make up the lineups for, a couple weeks at a time, like in advance. Mm-hmm. So it's a very weird thing that when I saw they had that much of a platoon split, it kind of just struck me as odd because it's like, well, he's not even making the adjustments. It's like they know who's going to be pitching and they just kind of figure it out. But the one thing that you wrote in that same article today that kind of had me going with like the roster projections a little bit is when there was the discussion about Rodolfo Castro and Shelton answered and said, we do not have hey, this guy is going to be a starter at second base. And to me, it was like kind of weird because it's like, well, if he isn't the starter, his main competition right now is probably G1 Bay and Tucupita Marcano, which was so weird to me as to why, not that I was the biggest, everybody thinks I'm the biggest Kevin Newman fan because I talk about Kevin Newman a lot. I just liked Kevin Newman as the ball player and the way he worked and his ethic and, just being able to get better defensively. And I knew he wasn't going to ever be like this giant powerhouse of a hitter, but I just kind of liked him. And it was just like, well, why don't we, like, now it has to almost be Castro's job, right?
Yeah, I admit I was one of those people that was going on the assumption that Castro is going to be your opening day second base. I still think he will be the opening day second baseman, but you can see stuff that he has to work on. I mean, there's still swing and miss. That's the problem. It seems with a lot of guys, that they have on this roster right now that they really got to kind of rein in. I mean, there's going to be a lot of strikeouts. That's the way the game is now. But some of these guys, Sawinski and Cruz in particular, those numbers are alarmingly high. I kind of, you like what Rodolfo can do. He has a little bit of pop. He makes a lot of plays out there defensively. Deshawn will do the same thing. Marcano as well. Marcano just hasn't been able to get traction in the majors, and that's kind of like when I look at him now. I think the hang up with him is he just he just can't hang on to an everyday gig or even like an everyday couple of gigs where he's out there in the lineup every day, one position or another. With Bay, it's just a question of experience. I think that he needs to get some time in the majors and really show what he could do here. I mean, he's hit well for the most part in the minors. He's only played, I want to say it's 42 or 44 games in center field in his career, and 10 of them were in the Arizona Fall League last year. So, I mean, that's why there are some people that, along with thinking Rodolfo is your starting second baseman, they just plug base Shiwan into center field, and I don't know. I mean, it's an important gig on any team, and every center field is going to be big. But PNC Park, I mean, you've seen it. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
And a guy that really has very limited experience as a center fielder. I don't know if you want him quarterbacking your offense.
Yeah, it's a tough call
necessarily, to mix my metaphors. But they're certainly convinced he's athletic enough to handle the job, and they believe he could become savvy enough in a short amount of time to become good in center field. It's just a matter of how they're going to approach it now. I think some of it is the Reynolds situation. When do they trade him? Do they trade him? Where does he play if he stays? I thought it was really interesting last year when they plugged him in the left field for a few days. I think defensively he's better in left than he is at center. So that's one part of the equation. Another part of it too is just, who else do they have? Where else do they think they're going from here? I kind of think Sawinski could probably handle center field. I really like what I saw from him defensively last year. I thought his routes were pretty decent. I thought he seemed kind of heads up out there. Once he got past the initial, when he first got called up, my gosh, you could just see him sometimes, and he seemed a little overwhelmed by everything. Just a classic, rookie situation. When he got recalled then later in the year, I thought he just seemed so much cooler, so much more level-headed, confident out there. And, I could see him handling some time in center field. So, but, maybe it's a case where with Rodolfo, they don't want to anoint him the second baseman right now and have him come in with that kind of attitude, because we saw last year, and I mentioned this to Shelton on Friday, I mean, yes, the cell phone incident got a lot of play, and it was embarrassing, and it was stupid. It was a rookie mistake. But there was also a game earlier in the season that I mentioned to Shelton, and he kind of grinned because I think he knew where I was going with him. I think they were playing, I think it was San Diego. I knew it was a road game, and I'm pretty sure it was Jerks and Profar who was on the other team. But anyway, Rodolfo, there was a play, like he thought he had beaten out an infield single, and he goes across the bag, and he's putting his arms out like, safe. And you look at the replay, he was out. He was called out. And he couldn't believe it. He was, Then he goes back to the dugout, And then later in the game, I'm pretty sure it was Profar hit I think what turned out to be the game-winning home run. And as he came toward home plate, he looked right into the Pirates' dugout and put his arms out like, safe. And I thought, ooh, You don't want that happening, You don't want veterans. And I'm sure somebody in the dugout then kind of nudged Rodolfo and said, hey, you see, don't do that crap, because it'll come back and bite you. That kind of stuff. I mean, how old is Rodolfo? Off the top of my head, I really don't know. 23?
23, I believe, yes.
Okay. So, still a kid. So that's an area where he's got to, polish up his game a little bit. Just, and that's one of the things I think the Pirates addressed by bringing in the veterans they did this year, is just to give the guys a sense of this is how you carry yourself on the field, in the clubhouse, in workouts. It's a certain way to do it. And maybe they don't want Rodolfo to come in anointed as the starting second baseman and lose some of the progress he's made in terms of gaining maturity. Yeah, that was a long answer to a short question.
It's a good answer, and it just with the addition of Santana there over at first base. Chris and I brought up last week something that's been out there, but Mendy Lopez being called up to do some of the infield coordinator duties. definitely going to be, helping with Cruz and with Castro. But when I thought about like the Castro situation, the other thing, and I was like, oh, why didn't they keep Kevin Newman? And so my mind was on these platoons pretty much like all day today. And so I'm like, I wonder what Castro's splits actually are. And in the minors, when he was batting right-handed, his OPS was about 250 points higher than it was as a left-handed hitter. And once he got up to the majors, and I know it's only been like a little bit of a cup of coffee, last 2 years ago, and then up and down last year, but it was creeping towards almost a 300-point difference. So it's like, well, maybe we didn't need Newman in there because Castro's actually hit, right-handed pretty well. And so it would be like you almost need like a Bay, somebody else like that who could fill in on some of the days because you don't want it to be a straight platoon. But if he's starting to struggle against them to get a left-handed bat in there, and that's just something that kind of struck me today.
That's a good point. Yeah, and it's then for a club like the Pirates, I'm sure that's for most clubs now, maybe all clubs, that kind of stuff doesn't go unnoticed. And if you're a guy whose OPS is 1.4, then the 300-point split is not a big deal. But yeah, when you're still an up and comer, 250, 300 points is a huge difference, and yeah, it's worth considering.
Yeah, and going back to the first article we were talking about, the mailbag one, you had kind of like said, oh, maybe Jared Triolo for opening day, and as your thought process goes along, you kind of walk that back a little bit in today's article and put more of like the Bay and Marcano thing in there. Is it with Triolo? I mean, most of it is probably. I mean, a lot of people have seen these jumps, with a Sawinski with no AAA experience, Diego Castillo with limited AAA experience, and getting that bump up. Was that kind of your thinking during that mailbag one, which was like, yeah, his defense will definitely play, and his bat's actually not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year he's one of only maybe 9 players in Altoona Curve history to hit multiple leadoff home runs. He's a guy that, I mean, he has a little bit more pop in his bat than even I expected when I first started watching him. And I remember the thing that kind of stuck with me is it was toward the end of the season. I think it was late August, early September, thereabouts. A few days after I had worn the Altoona Curve mascot.
That was awesome.
And I was sitting in the dugout up there talking to Nick Gonzalez and about coming back, him coming back from his injury, and he really started to turn it on a little bit in those, I guess, 40, maybe 30 odd games after he came back from that foot injury. And we were talking about how difficult it was. I said, well, difficult for the team to absorb too. I mean, you're starting second baseman, you're the double play combo with Peggy, and then you go down for 2 months. And he just said, yeah, as sick as I felt when that went down, when I got hurt, I felt maybe even worse when Triolo had got hurt. Yeah, this was like real close to the end of the season, like about maybe a week or two. Triolo hyperextended his knee in a weird play, stepping on home plate as he was scoring a run, and didn't play again the rest of the year. And he said that really just gutted us and gutted everybody because, and he says, that hurt almost as bad as whenever I got hurt for me, because he's kind of the heartbeat of this team. And I thought that's kind of a thing that's underrated. Everybody I talked to that day, I made a point of talking to three other people about Jared. They all said that same kind of thing. And he just seems to have that it factor that you need to have in a clubhouse. He's a galvanizing kind of guy, a guy that players will rally around and rally for. Even you don't always find that in players. Even big stars don't necessarily have that. But Triolo really does. I mean, they made T-shirts for him, that the players wore. Tree hugger, I think was what the slogan was on it or whatever. And he just seems to be a guy that brings that big intangible. And he can play. I mean, he's got a hell of a glove, and he's got a little bit of pop. And now they have him play different positions. He was over at second base last year. Obviously, third base is his bread and butter. I think he might have had a couple of games in the outfield because everybody does. I think they're going to make, me and Mackey and Kevin Gorm get out in the outfield too before this year's over. So he just seemed to be a good piece. He can do a lot of little things, and he can do some very big things. I think sooner or later, when they put him on the 40-man this year, I wasn't too surprised. I think sooner or later this year, we're going to see him in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and I think that's where I saw him maybe as more of like a long-term answer if somebody went down or somebody got injured or somebody got traded or whatever it would be. And it, the other guys like maybe a Marcano or something might be the quicker, couple day fill-in guy. I wanted to get to two more things from the Fearless predictions here. So not to completely cut off, because that's all great stuff with Triolo. And I could listen to talk about, these players in the minors and stuff. Like everybody knows that, all day long. But one of your predictions, I'm going to do a little bit of a twist on this, because you said that Nutting will break his silence. What I see from fans more now is they want Travis Williams to break his silence. So I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are on, how the front office, how they address the media, and address the fans.
How? Well, they don't. It's boy, how to put this? Bob wasn't always. He would do usually every year in spring training. He would do his, State of the Union address with the players and then come talk to us after it. And he knew what he was going to get. There'd be questions like, why didn't you go after this or that free agent? Why is payroll where it is? This and that and the other thing. And yes, they tended to be the same questions, but in part that was because the Pirates always seem to have the same issues year after year. And I think we're at the point now where Bob hasn't met with a group setting with the media since Travis and Ben were hired in the fall of 2019. Not due to a lack of effort on my part or Jason's part or Kevin or anybody else's part. We've all asked for him. We've all approached him at different times. The last time we approached him as a group, it was during the Hall of Fame induction, for the Pirates Hall of Fame induction last summer. It was the day after the Pirates clinched the losing season. And Bob, we asked Bob a couple questions about the Hall of Fame thing. And I said, well, hey, it's, kind of coincidental timing, or kind of not coincidental, kind of awful timing here that we're celebrating Pirates history on a day when, you lock up another losing season. Do you have any comment on where the team has gone these past couple of years? And he gave his response that this was not the time to talk about the ball club, and walked away. And I thought,
it's tough.
I think
it's a tough situation.
Yeah. He owes it to the fans to say something, anything. And there are legitimate questions out there. Whenever the O'Neill Cruz situation was going on, when the whole legal situation in the Dominican a couple of years back, Bob Nutting said nothing, neither positive nor negative nor anything. No statement at all from the owner of the franchise, the guy who signs the paychecks, who sets the tone for the team, who decides what he wants the team's image and tone to be. You mentioned Travis. It's the same kind of thing. He was hired as president. Frank Cooney was a baseball guy. He was the MLB's top legal advisor, and he had a lot of contentious run-ins during arbitration hearings and union negotiations. He knew the game. He knew the nuts and bolts of the economics of the game, but he also knew something about the playing and strategy. With Travis, I get the sense more that he was brought in to be the guy who kind of sells the team. How do you spin the team? How do you sell it to fans who are frustrated because they haven't seen, a playoff series victory since 1979. And you would think in that kind of role that you would want to be fan facing and seen as open and transparent and conversant. And he's not been. He gives the same kind of answer. Now is not the time to talk about X, Y, or Z. I don't know. I just think that if I was a fan, I would be, I would feel kind of unloved.
Yeah.
If I was an average fan, I would feel kind of unloved. I mean, the Pirates, about a month ago, I asked to speak to Travis about FanFest. Why did it, obviously we know why it went away because of the pandemic, but when is it coming back? Are there going to be changes? It had gotten a little bit stale. So you're going to do some new things. You're going to try something different. What are you going to do? What about the caravan? I was told there's no FanFest, but we're thinking about bringing it back. And there's no caravan, but we might have other things instead. I said, well, I need more specifics. Well, that would be Travis's job. Well, great. Let me talk to Travis. Well, that's been what, I think 6 weeks now.
Yeah.
And we're still waiting for Travis to address that. And then now, over the weekend, the Pirates had what they did not advertise, but now during the day of that, they described it as a winter warm-up, only for season ticket holders. There was, about 1,500 people there, I think, is what they said. So the message they seem to be sending is if you're a season ticket holder, if you're a corporate sponsor, we'll be here for you. But if you're Joe Bag of Donuts who wants to go to, 3 or 4 games a year or whatever, come to your 3 or 4 games a year.
Yeah.
And that'll be about it. And we're okay with that. So I don't know. For me, it doesn't make much difference if he talks to me or not. I'm going to write what I write either way. I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be, try to dig for as much information as I can. I just think it's kind of a slap at the everyday fans. Because I remember a much different experience when I grew up in Pittsburgh as a Pirates fan in the 1970s and 1980s. The first time I ever interviewed a professional ball player, I was in college when the Pirates caravan came to State College on a snowy Tuesday afternoon. and I talked to R.J. Reynolds and Lanny Fratteri, and I forget who else, at the Days Inn, or I think back then it was a Sheraton. It's not even open anymore in State College. But, those guys got in the van and they drove 2 hours. At that point, it was more like 3 because the roads were different, just to go to State College and talk to people. Now, it doesn't happen. I don't know. It feels more corporate. It feels more sterile and structured, and it feels a lot less fun.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing for me is, people, when I went to, a few Pirates games last year, know that I have this podcast or whatever, and they said, well, what do you think about Travis Williams, not speaking? And I kind of equated it to, there's different ways that people show love or show effort in relationships. And Travis seems to be kind of more of a doer, not with like the whole Pirates Fest thing, but it's like, okay, everybody says the scoreboard's crappy. Well, he has to go and talk to the sports authority, to get, permit, to get that money and to get that done. Heard fans saying, could you do this with, more stuff for kids? Could there be more like, bar atmosphere? Could there be more, that type of stuff? And that stuff was done, I know that it was Jimmy T that was probably pushing more of for the Hall of Fame, but that's also stuff that, Travis has to organize, all the charities type stuff. There's a lot of different things, but I do agree. I would at least just like to hear him talk. But I think on the other side with fans, sometimes it's because maybe Ben Cherington isn't telling them exactly what they want to hear. So it's like, well, can we get another voice in the room? Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of where my mind goes with it. I'm not as upset, but yes, I would like to hear from him. But if I don't, as long as Ben's talking and he's not being quiet, because the structure is a little bit different than it was when it was Coonley and Huntington. Like you said, Travis is not a baseball guy. I'm not saying he doesn't like baseball, but it's just he's more of an organizer, more of a doer. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely do appreciate your efforts to do that, Rob. And we're going way over here on time on our 30 minutes of Bucs here. But once I start talking baseball and having like these good conversations, they just don't really stop. So for anybody that doesn't, please go follow Rob on Twitter at Rob Biertempfel. Go subscribe to The Athletic. Read the articles. I think I got back in on they always have like deals out there or something, and I think for the first year it's like $1 a month or something. I don't know which deals are out there now, but it's definitely worth the subscription, not only for Rob's articles, but also all of the different stuff around Major League Baseball. If you're a big baseball fan, it's a must subscribe. So Rob, you know what, I do appreciate you letting me ask you some tough questions here, some fun questions, and would love to have you back on again sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great, man. Anytime. Just give me a shout.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but